Let's see if I agree with myself from 3 years ago. I have not watched this video in ages. My opinion has changed. My opinion has become more nuanced. My editing, I hope, has got better. My presentation in general has got better. Why modern MMOs suck and how to fix them. That's a very emotive title. Do modern MMOs suck? Are they bad? Was I just jumping on the hate bandwagon? Did I realize that most MMO players are jaded old veterans and just want to hate on everything? You know, think about the old days, that kind of stuff. Do they just hate it? Let's find out.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife Hayes, and I love MMORPGs. I think they're one of the greatest gaming achievements in the last 20 years, and will continue to be a part of the gaming landscape for the rest of time.
My opinion there has not changed. I do still love MMORPGs. I think they're amazing, and they will be a part of the gaming landscape until the end of time. But have they changed? Have they? Some of you are sat there thinking, Josh, you've paused the video 14 seconds in. It's a 22-minute video. We're going to be here a while. Look, all right? I need to make sure that there is absolutely no reason that you would watch this reaction over the original to make sure the reaction doesn't replace the original in the algorithm. It simply enhances the original. And that means we are going to go deep. Okay? Not like that, but God, clips already. There you go, Visa. There's your lunch. MMOs years ago were just EverQuest and Albion, Ultima Online. And then it was then things happened. Now it's just Genshin Impact and all that kind of stuff. Director's commentary version. Pretty much, this is the director's commentary. First of all, I have not changed the font that I use in 3 years. And for anyone really concerned, for anyone who wants some deep Josh Strife lore, that font is called Sword Art Online, okay? It just is. I'm sorry. I actually had a series where I reviewed and critiqued Sword Art Online based on how good it would be as an actual MMO. And the answer is, it wouldn't be terrible, but there's a lot of UI issues. And that entire series got copyright claimed by Sony Japan. So that's why you can't watch that anymore. Just so you know. There we go. Some deep lore for you. Let's keep going.
The ability to exist within and explore a consistent virtual world with millions of other people is a monumental achievement. And now we have more MMORPGs than ever.
For some reason, I thought it would be a good idea to include footage where the Neverwinter assets just don't load.
Ranging from classical fantasy to interstellar sci-fi. Servers for every part of the globe. Games.
Servers for every part of the globe except Australia. You guys don't get servers for any game. Okay? You don't. Not enough people in Australia play MMOs. You're not allowed them. When a company is making an MMO, they're like, where should we put the servers? Europe? Yeah, that'll do. America? Yeah, they need some as well. What about Asia? Yeah, okay, cool. Asia will work. What about Australia? No. No, you don't deserve it. You guys have to play with lag.
Changed into multiple languages. With all this advancement, you'd assume MMORPGs are going from strength to strength, only improving. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Are MMOs only improving, or have I just set up some kind of hook that's going to bring people in? That, in the business term, we call a hook. Now, I know that it's 47 seconds into the original video. We've got 20 minutes left to go, and we're stopping a lot, but just general poll in the chat, have MMOs improved or not in the last, I made this 3 years ago, so let's say 3 years. People say no. All right, I didn't expect that. I thought most of you would be playing New World, you'd be playing the new Final Fantasy XIV expansion. Yeah, I really thought more people would say yes to that. Have they improved? No, 61% of you were like, no, they've got worse. Everything's terrible. New World wasn't good on release, but it's kind of found a middling ground now. So, okay, cool. 61% of you say they haven't improved, thus proving me correct 3 years ago.
I've played MMORPGs my entire life. I've adventured through RuneScape, EverQuest, World of Warcraft, Runes of Magic, Terra, Neverwinter, Guild Wars
Rip Terra
1 and 2, Aeon, Skyforge, and many more. I've seen years of advancement and gameplay changes that developers hyped and customers met with indifference.
Can we talk about hype and how it's just almost no one outside of the immediate circle of people who have created it Just release the content, and if it's good, it will do well. That's what it is. If it's good, people will hype it up when they get to play it. Don't hype something up before it exists.
I've seen player bases rise to the incredible heights of millions of accounts and hundreds of thousands of active players, and fall to the pitiful maintenance mode every dying MMORPG must go through before being shut down for good. But how has this happened? How can a genre so worldwide rise to such heights and then fall so intensely from grace? What is ruining modern MMORPGs? Well, after almost 20 years of playing them, I think I've finally found the answer.
No one has more confidence than a late to mid-20s white guy. I had all the answers. All of them. Every single one. Tell you what, when I started my YouTube channel 5 years ago, I'm like, why don't people know things? I know things. I'm going to share the things I know with people. I'm going to put this world correct. Then I spent some time on the internet. Then I learned some things. Then I realized how much I didn't know. I didn't even know how much I didn't know. And now people come up to me and they're like, Josh, what do you think? And I'm like, I think I'm a complete fucking idiot who is just about scraping by in this life, who may have some opinions that might or might not be wrong or right. I don't know. I just want to have a cup of tea and play RuneScape, man.
Let me explain.
Ever cringe at those tricky...
I am not paying for YouTube Premium, all right? I'm not doing it.
I started off by scouring Reddit, gaming forums.
What a terrible way to start a sentence. I started my research by going to Reddit. Oh, dude. No. Oh, it's just what a terrible foundation to begin from. And now I hate everything.
And asking my friends or Discord chat what they remembered loving about MMORPGs, what their favourite memories were, those never-to-be-forgotten adventures they'd warmly reminisce about. And even though I received hundreds of different stories, they all had several core themes. Let's take some examples and see if you can work it out. These extracts are from other MMORPG fans reliving their favourite memories.
I genuinely enjoyed doing this bit of the video because I basically said, right, everyone thinks MMOs RPGs are getting worse. Why don't I go to people and be like, hey, what's your favourite memory? And everyone, when you ask them what they actually love about them, they've got so much stuff they love. But when you say, hey, tell me about MMOs, you just get negativity. Absolute loads and loads and loads of negativity.
2007 was peak RuneScape for me. Me and my mates used to hop in this Skype chat we had every night after school and all do our own thing. Some of us fished, some trained Slayer, and some just stood around trying to merchant and sell things. But every night before we logged off, we'd meet up and go kill a boss for an hour or two. It wasn't great money because there were so many of us the loot split was awful, but we had the best time together.
When was the last time you did something in an MMO that wasn't efficient? What was it? I mean, as silly as that sounds, I used to genuinely have this idea of, it was beautiful. I would get home from school, we had this Skype chat going for like 2 years, it never even closed. There were so many people in the Skype chat, it never hung up. It would get so laggy, but we would keep trying to do it. When was the last time you logged onto a game, did something, and you knew that it wasn't efficient? Because, as they said, the creator of SimCity once said, given enough opportunity, a player will optimize the fun out of a game. Have you ever sat down to play a game and within about half an hour to an hour of playing it, if you're lucky, if you even get that far, you start to think, I should go on the wiki and work out the most efficient way to do this? Not the most fun way, not the most enjoyable way, the most efficient way. People seem to have this idea that when you sit down to play a game, if you do not make progress that either the game or the community as a whole recognize as progress, it has less value than you just playing the game for your own way. Have you ever been playing a game and made little progress and thought, wow, that was a waste of time? What a strange thing to think. What a strange thing to do, to sit down to enjoy your hobby and to do it in such a way that others may not see it as efficient, that the game may not see as efficient, that you may not progress through fast enough, and your first thought is, that was a waste of time. People seem to have this opinion I've noticed it be more and more prevalent nowadays, that when playing a game, you must make progress. Because playing a game without progressing is wasting time. But playing a game while progressing is not wasting time. And I think that might be because there are so many games available to us now that we want to play all of them. But we say to ourselves, hey, I'm not going to play that game until I've played this game. So playing the game you're playing now isn't just about slowing down and experiencing it, it's about completing it to get it out the way to allow something else to happen.
My guildies and I would stand around in the starting area and welcome any new account we saw being made, give them some basic items, and then follow them around for a while, making sure they were okay. Most of them would join our guild afterwards and loved how welcome we made them feel. We knew the tutorial was rubbish, so we had someone go and help them.
How many of you, after playing a game for a hell of a long time, decided, you know what, the progress that I'm making is now too slow, and the bosses that I'm killing are now, their drops are too rare, or you just finished whatever you feel comfortable finishing, and your thought was, I'm going to go and help someone else. I'm going to go and have them, see them have the same love that I had. Have you ever fallen into that pit where when you try and help someone and they do something and you say to them, no, that's the wrong way, don't do it that way, do it this way instead, this way's more efficient? You can very much immediately optimize the fun out of someone else's experience. A lot of people helped me in Elder Scrolls Online. Some of you saying no, some saying yes. Have you ever wanted your friend to come and play an MMORPG with you, and as you were watching them struggle in the early game, instead of letting them go through the same struggles that you went through to develop the same love, you try to make sure they don't make any of the same mistakes or the same pitfalls? Ironically, preventing someone from making the same mistakes you made doesn't actually generate more love for the game. If anything, it just takes away an experience that they could have at one point have. I find it very strange. In MMOs, don't give new players a ton of items and money. And the reason that you shouldn't do this, in my personal opinion, is the vast amount of an MMO is the progression. It is the, I worked hard, I have been rewarded with this, which I can see makes my character better, faster, stronger. I can see my character has improved. My effort has been rewarded. If you just give people some of the highest level stuff or the best stuff in the game, they then ask themselves, hang on, why am I doing anything now? Why am I putting the effort in? Because the reward that I would get for putting the effort in, I have already got. Therefore, it's not a reward. It's just the same thing. You don't always make people feel better about an MMO by giving them everything from the start. The grind is sometimes the enjoyable part. And that feeling of putting hours of effort into something to then be rewarded with a better weapon, a better bit of armor, a better item, that item has weight. That item feels super important because you've gone through the journey to get it. This is another video, but when you remove the journey that you have to go on to get something, then that something actually has less emotional value to you because it's not connected to anything. It's emotionally empty. Whereas if you have to go on a journey to get something, it's emotionally full. Who in World of Warcraft got the Lucid Nightmare? That horse that you had to go on an incredible across the kind of continent quest to get. I was able to get the Lucid Nightmare. One of my absolute best memories within World of Warcraft is getting the Lucid Nightmare. I think it was fantastic. Right, let's keep going.
I'd stand in the trading tunnel in EverQuest for hours flipping items, buying low one side and selling high the other. You'd spot other people doing exactly the same thing and end up with an intense rivalry, always trying to type immediately after them so it pushed their chat up off the screen first.
Whoever had a rival in an MMORPG? And this only happens when a community can form and remain consistent. Because one of the things that don't get me wrong, I very much admire the fact that EverQuest has its mega server. I admire the fact that RuneScape lets you change home worlds whenever you want to, so it's easier to group up with people. But that freedom does also come with a price. It comes with the price of removing a consistent community. When you play an MMO and you see 5 people in a group or 10 people in a group, if you know that group can be formed of any combination of 5 from the entire game, you don't really feel a connection to any of those 5. I mean, how many of you have used Group Finder to run a dungeon or run a raid in any game, and then at the end of it, everyone's left, You didn't even remember people's names. You just mechanically went through a moment together, and then it's ephemeral. You'll never see them again. You'll never talk to them again. You might see them once or twice, but there's no connection there. There's no moment. It does take away that sense of community. And when people say to me that MMOs used to be about community, about playing together as a group, it was because you would see the same people repeatedly. I remember when I was young, when I was a teenager, we were playing RuneScape back when in like 2006 or something, and I was standing in the Clan Wars arena at RuneScape, and I just thought it'd be really cool to have an in-game rival. So I just typed in chat, looking for rival, and this guy called RuneXpel just replied saying, shut up. And I thought, perfect. I added him to my friends list, and for the next couple of years, we were rivals. Every time his clan was at Clan Wars, I would bring mine, we would fight. We would lose. We weren't as big. We weren't as geared. But, oh man, if someone said to me, hey Josh, RuneXpel's at the Willows, I'm like, guys, willow trees, now, we're taking them. Didn't even need willow logs. He may have seen it as harassment. I saw it as guild rivalry. He messaged me a couple of years ago and be like, you still playing? I'm like, yeah. He's like, shut up. Fantastic. He's kept that rivalry going for years. I appreciate that. But yeah, when you take away, or should I say, not when you take away, but when you add in the ability to mix the communities as, endlessly as you want to, you do remove that structure that builds up around having specific communities.
Back in Neverwinter, if you wanted to do a dungeon with a friend who wasn't the same level as you had to actually travel to that dungeon within the world. No group finder. So we'd load up on suppliers in the main hub city of Protector's Enclave and ride all the way to wherever we decided to go to. Sometimes lower levels would aggro the mobs in the higher level maps, and we'd have to waste our supplies just trying to keep them alive. But damn, it was good fun.
So that was in Neverwinter, when Neverwinter did have a group finder, and if you were all max level, I think it was either 60 or 70 at the time, what would happen is if you had 5 level 70 players, you could jump in the group finder and it would teleport you directly to the dungeon entrance. But if you had someone in your party who was level 50 or level 60, they couldn't use the group finder, but they could still enter the dungeon. So what would have to happen is you would have to run that person all the way through the dangerous area. And I quite like this. It's another design I like about Runes of Magic. Runes of Magic did not prevent you from walking into a higher level dungeon. Didn't stop you doing it. You'd die because a basic mob would just wreck you. And if your level was way too low, your experience would actually be leveled down to prevent people from power leveling you through it, but you could do it. And I admired that level of freedom. Yeah, someone in the chat says escort quest. It was almost like a real life escort quest to escort your low level friend all the way to a high level dungeon. I really admired that.
I remember trying to get into Runes of Magic years ago. The game had its issues, but the main problem was I couldn't find any advice online about how to do anything, or what certain NPCs or attacks even did. So I spent hours figuring it out and writing stuff down. I ended up with a little notebook next to my PC to check on whenever I couldn't remember.
Has anyone ever actually taken handwritten notes about an MMORPG? And this used to happen in the Meridian 59 days, this happened in the EverQuest days, this happened in the Ultima Online days, and what it would be is maps you couldn't just Google. Google Images were terrible at the time, and you may not know all the shortcuts, and you might not know where to find all the items. So people would actually draw stuff. People would draw it on graph paper. People would note down conversation trees. People would note down how items interacted. People would note down mixing potions, and then you would share this information normally with an internet relay chat or with a forum. And I'm showing my age now, guys, but come on, who used forums back in the day? They were cool. And then everything became centralized, and now everyone just uses either Wikipedia or Reddit. Information itself used to be at a premium. Knowing things and having access to maps, having access to enemy strategies, having access to numbers. I used to know people who, when playing Neverwinter, would every single patch work out the most efficient use of power points or ability points to make overpowered classes and then actually sell that information. They'd be like, hey, this is the best way to make a barbarian in patch whatever of Neverwinter. If you want to know where I've put all of my points, PayPal me £5 or something like that. People did that. And I thought, okay, this is actually making information a valuable commodity, because the sharing of information is not yet super easy for everyone. And once everyone is able to share the information super easily, then that knowledge is no longer rare and valuable and powerful and esoteric. It's now just, oh, everyone does that. People in the chat, I mean, World of Warcraft classes back in the day, special equipments, where to get it from. People would keep information to themselves or within their own guilds. You'd write it down. You'd have notebooks. I remember, I have a vivid memory. I used to play Morrowind as a kid, and I had a laptop, terrible old laggy laptop. I remember playing the Blood Moon expansion in Morrowind, which had snow graphics, and I would be playing it like a freaking PowerPoint. You know, it would be lagging and lagging and lagging. I'd see one frame every 2 seconds. But I had, remember the map that came with Morrowind? You know, the huge, big, you know, cool, the map of Vardenfell. I had that blue tacked on the wall next to me. I actually almost developed a crick in my neck because I would be playing on my laptop, glancing at the map. Laptop, map, laptop, map. I memorized how to get through Vivek. I memorized how to get from any place to any other place because I was staring at that map. But to me, that physical media was super useful. And I would write down spells. I would write down combinations. I had notepads of this stuff because I wasn't smart enough at the time to just Google it. I didn't know that you could.
And ended up telling other players everything that I'd learned. I have hundreds of stories like this from other players, but after reading them and trying to find the links, I realized something. There are 2 things MMORPGs did that made them great, and it's those 2 things that have been removed or reduced in a majority of modern games.
I genuinely cannot remember what those 2 things are, but what do we think they're going to be? The 2 things that obviously those stories had in common. The first one seems to be communication and community, and the second one seems to be playing inefficiently. That's what I would go for with this one. Doing something that's not specifically about progression and doing something that's about interaction with the community. That's where I'm going to go for with this one. I genuinely can't remember what I did.
1. They were not convenient. Convenience sounds like a good thing.
Didn't see that coming. Forgot about that. But can we extrapolate from that? They were not convenient. What's convenience in an MMO? Is it fast travel? Is it being able to have access to any information at any moment? Is it being able to look up anything? Is it being able to teleport exactly to the thing you're at? Because part of me as a kind of designer, I wouldn't call myself a game designer, but I've looked into the design ethics of it enough, is players want convenience. But is it one of those things where players want something because it removes a challenge that they're facing? But when you remove the challenge that they're facing, those players quickly realize that overcoming the challenge was its own reward. It unfortunately is, you think you do, but you don't. If you have to, do step A, B, C, D, E to get reward X, and people say, hey, I just want reward X, remove step A. Okay, cool. Now it's just B, C, D, X. Okay, well, that's pointless. Remove step B as well. Okay, cool. B was a bit annoying. We removed that as well. Well, why not remove step C? Okay, yeah, C was easier. We've made it more convenient to skip through C. Eventually, it will get to a point where the reward actually has less value to players, both in-game monetary-wise and emotional and gameplay experience-wise, because the reward for what? What's it a reward for now? Is it a reward for just teleporting straight to the dungeon, using a guide to kill the boss, and getting the drop 50 times an hour? Because previously it was a reward for doing something much more difficult. The easier you make access to a reward, you are diluting what that reward is.
And indeed, in many ways, it is a positive trait for something to have, but making something convenient isn't always an improvement. Let me give you an example to explain this. Imagine, at the top of a mountain, across a dangerous valley, hidden at the end of a raging river, only shown on a secret map held by a travelling trickster, sits a wise old sage, knower of many things. And this sage will share his knowledge with you if you can find the trickster, take the map, sail the river, traverse the valley, climb the mountain, and ask him a question.
I think, ironically, we've literally just ended up with that example anyway. And this is an example I use for many people all the time. When you look at a lot of the legends of old, you realize that they were legends because the journey the main character goes on, or the journey the legend goes on, is a difficult one. And if you remove all of the challenges that person had to go on to achieve the reward or whatever they were trying to get, then suddenly the reward is worth far less and it's not as important anymore. Oh yeah, look, it's steps A, B, C, and D. What if people were like, you know what, hey, I don't want to climb the mountain, I don't want to cross the river, I don't want to find someone else, but I still want to meet the sage. Well, suddenly, meeting the sage is no longer epic. It's now easy. There's a perfect example someone's just put in the chat. You don't want the journey to the task. You just want to do the task itself. But is the journey to the task part of the task? Is the journey to get to the difficult part actually part of the challenge overall?
Many try, few succeed.
That's an interesting one. Many try, few succeed. The easier you make something to do, the more convenient you make something to do, the more people can do it. Now, on one side, that's great. You want lots of people to experience your game. On another side, if the difficult part or the non-convenient part is the game, then removing this is changing your game experience. This is almost like the people who were asking for easy mode in Elden Ring. Elden Ring was designed to be a specific experience. This is the experience they want you to have. Now, I'm not saying that's a correct or, wrong game decision. That was the game decision they made, and I respect the fact they stuck with it. And when people say, hey, can we have an easy mode for this? Would adding an easy mode change what Elden Ring fundamentally is? How much can you change again? Is this like a weird Ship of Theseus argument? Like, how much can you change an experience and replace it with other bits before it becomes a different experience from what was originally designed?
And after years and years, the legend of the sage grows and grows until everyone has heard of him, but few have ever seen him.
Everyone has heard of him, but few have ever seen him. That's a rarity argument. Who played World of Warcraft? Ashbringer. Pretty badass sword, that Ashbringer. You know what would definitely kill the perceived legendary status? Would be if everyone had one. It's totally okay to design an item or a weapon or a piece of armor that everyone can get access to. That's okay. But also make it difficult. Because as soon as everyone gets one, suddenly the value of each individual one gets diluted. I'm sorry to quote The Incredibles. I think it was Syndrome that said, when everyone's super, no one is. It's difficult to create the idea of legendary rarity when it's actually not legendarily rare. If you want to create a myth around something, it must remain mythical. You can't use the coding of mythical when actually it's very common. It's difficult, without a doubt, but you're using words that bring about these emotions and experiences that infer it's much rarer than it actually is.
Now imagine if the same sage lived in the middle of a major city and there were tour groups taken to him every hour. The second example has exactly the same end point as the first, talking to the sage, but the journey to make it happen has been made much more convenient. Surely this is a good thing, right?
It's also been monetized, but that is definitely a different discussion for a different day. Here's a weird thing. Have you ever found it very difficult to take something seriously when it seems displaced from its original location? And here's what I mean by that. Imagine you did go on a mythical journey. Imagine you did go on this globe-trotting adventure, and at the top of a mountain there was someone stood stoically in flowing robes, their wind whipping their hair back, and they looked mystical. They looked magical. And the entire scenario that you've been on, the environment that you're in, the journey you've taken, the hardships you've undergone, that actually increases the kind of mythical appeal of this person, of this deity that you've gone to meet. But if you were to take the same deity and stick them in the middle of Birmingham and, put them in the back of a pub somewhere and charge people £5 to go and see them, and they were just sat on a cheap IKEA sofa with a radio buzzing away in the background, suddenly, even though it's exactly the same person, you've changed the scenario that you meet them in, and it's less magical, it's less powerful. And this is where phenomenology comes in. My favorite word and my favorite bloody study. The fact that everything about an experience is part of the experience itself as well, including the situation and the emotional state that you find yourself in as a contributor or a member of that situation. You need everything to work with you. And unfortunately, when you make things more convenient to get to, you don't just remove the magic of getting to them. You remove the magic of having the experience, which adds up and stacks up and almost exponentially increases the completion of the task itself.
Well, yes and no. It's good because it makes the end goal easier to achieve, and it's bad because the end goal of anything is not where the experience and the adventure and the mystery actually lies. It is the journey to the end goal, the seeking of the map, the sailing of the river, the crossing of the valley and the climbing of the mountain. The difficulty present in achieving an audience with the sage was precisely what made the audience with him so damn impressive. It was the reward for the completion of a task, and reward is directly and inversely proportional to the difficulty of the task required for that reward.
Sometimes you do something really difficult and you get something in reward for it, and the thing you actually get has no monetary value at all. In many ways, it's just junk. But it's got emotional value attached to it, and it's almost got systemic value attached to it, because in order to get it, you must have done something. If someone does something really difficult and shows me a medal, or a trophy, or a bit of paper they got as proof of doing something, I'm not going to say, this is junk. This is worthless. It is 5 pence worth of melted cheap copper. It is a single bit of paper with some ink printed on it. It is, you can buy this from the local trophy store and have them engrave whatever they want on it. Because the value of that thing is not just the monetary value of the materials that's making it. It's the value of how you get the thing. When someone comes up to you and say, hey, here is an incredibly rare thing that only exists because we've only got a few of them, and we're giving them out to people who complete a difficult task. Okay, cool. Can I go on eBay and buy one of these? Yeah, you can, but it won't have the same connection to it. And I think what this is this connects to the idea of difficulty. When someone gets an item or a weapon or a piece of armor in a video game, especially an MMORPG, there is a journey that someone has gone on to get that weapon or to get that item. And when other people see you with it, they understand that it is not just a weapon or an item or a piece of armor. It's a representation of the completion of a journey. It is the symbol that you have undergone hardship and succeeded. And that has value. When you make these symbols available without the hardship, it loses its impressiveness. It loses its luster. It loses its power as a symbol, because now it doesn't represent the thing it used to represent. And symbols by themselves have no power at all. Symbols are simply representations of concepts or things or ideas. When you see someone with a symbol that represents something impressive, you are impressed. When you see someone with a symbol that has no idea behind it, no connection, then you don't know what to feel. People do say, you're missing a big part of the equation, novelty. The journey isn't novel anymore, but the item is. That's a very interesting way of putting it. Kaz, so we are talking about the novelty. The journey isn't novel. That's very true. And I think a lot of people miss that because when you play your first MMORPG, the process of running to a dungeon is new to you. When you play your 30th MMORPG, the process of running to a dungeon is not new to you. But the dungeon is different in both games, the task, the difficulty, the experience. Is a process in one game being different to a process in another? Is that the main point? Because if you have, journey A, run for half an hour, do something difficult, and then journey B, run for half an hour, do something difficult but different. The only difference in these journeys is whatever you do for A and B. The running part is the same. That's not unique. When you have, this is going to be difficult. Okay, what's difficult about it? You've got to do the same thing you've done in the last 30 games. Okay, cool. That's not novel. Difficulty being novel is an interesting, important concept. But if it's someone's first game, it's novel to them. If it's someone's first game and they don't have that half an hour run to the dungeon, they won't have that memory. You might have that memory from whatever MMORPG you played before, and your half-hour run to the dungeon made you think, corpse runs, I loved those. Everyone that went on a corpse run in EverQuest loves them. You ask them if they want to do it now. No, they don't want to do it now, because they actually remember that corpse runs take a hell of a long time without giving you a hell of a lot of gameplay. A lot of people seem to be incredibly nostalgic for the things that took a lot of time, and yet when you ask them to do those kind of things nowadays, they don't want to do it because they want to get to the gameplay. Of course, was that time taken to get to your corpse, was that gameplay? Was that part of the experience? Can you have an experience within an MMO that isn't necessarily gameplay? That's an interesting question.
Convenience makes achievements both easier to reach and meaningless to get. Every example I'd read out above lists a part of the game that was not convenient. The player drop splits not being personal, the in-game tutorial being useless, manual trading due to the lack of an auction house, being killed by mobs while travelling, or the lack of an up-to-date wiki.
Do you find that you have a lot of nostalgia for things that used to be difficult to do because you did them, but if presented with a situation where you are required to do something difficult, you don't want to do it now? You like the memory of having done it, but if you're like, hey, do you want to do it again? No. Do you have a good memory of this? Yeah, I enjoy it. I remember these times when me and my friends, used to spend hours being inefficient. Okay, cool. Do you want to be inefficient now? No. Because the memory is great. But when you say to people, why don't you do that again? Why don't you recreate that memory now and see how it feels now? Suddenly people realize, actually, I have a different mindset now. I have less time. I'm grown up. I have a job. I have kids to look after. Not me personally, but other people who have MMORPG histories have, different time commitments now. And while they remember having a great time being inefficient years ago, you ask them if they want to be inefficient now? No, they don't. It's very, very... It's almost sad that the fondest memories you have are the experiences that you don't want to have again. Because if you had them now, you wouldn't be able to enjoy them.
Convenience kills adventure. The easier you make something to achieve, the less impact and personal pride that achievement will carry.
Why didn't they just fly the eagles to Mordor? I mean, apart from the fact there are many actual reasons in the book, it would have been a crap story. There are moments when you have to look and go, because it makes a better story. That's fine. Not everything has to be absolutely 100% completely efficient. Sometimes it just makes a better story to do it that way. That's fine. You're okay doing that. Why didn't they just tunnel underground to Mordor? Could have worked. Absolutely could have worked. Just fast travel to Mordor. Yeah, In fact, as long as Gollum's been in there before and now Gollum's in your party, you unlock the fast travel location. You just pop over there, throw it in. Convenience changes adventure. Convenience changes experience. Who here in the chat has ever been camping? Because comedy is just tragedy plus time. That's what it is. A good memory is sometimes a shit time that you try and, relive later. And I don't mean terrible as in like actual traumatic and hurt. If you've ever been camping, who's ever been absolutely rained out of their tent? Who is absolutely chucked it down, your pack's muddy, your shoes aren't fitting the road. You can't take your boots off when you go camping. So if you take your boots off, your feet swell up, and then when you try and put them back on, it hurts like hell and starts rubbing. And then after you've walked for an hour or two, your feet have shrunk slightly, your boots are flopping all over the place. It's not a good place. Who has had a, not bad, but a challenging, difficult experience with their friends, with themselves at the time, and then you look back on it now and go, oh man, that was a crazy adventure. You almost smile when you say about it. Oh, that was difficult. This happens a lot in military-style boot camps, and that is why a lot of the kind of Band of Brothers attitude exists, where you look back on the difficult times that you survived together and think, oh man, wow, that was difficult. We got through it together, though. It wasn't funny at the time. It wasn't even fun at the time. But you look back on it and you're like, oh man, they were the days. You might have hated high school, but then you get together with the one person that you got on really well with. You look back and you're like, oh yeah, we had some laughs at that. That is a difficult thing to do. There have been days when I needed to get the bus somewhere. I got the bus somewhere. I ran out of, cash. I had no money in my pocket. And I'm thinking, right, the next walk home is 3 hours across muddy fields. And you freaking hate it at the time. You're like, this is awful. I just want someone to pick me up and take me home. But then a couple of weeks later, you're like, you know what? That trek across the field was actually character building, soul searching. I like that. You've very much got to find this level. It exists between easy and life-changingly traumatic. This level of, it's not convenient, it's not even fun, it's challenging, but it's rewarding after you've done it. It makes you a better person for having the memory of having done it. It's a test of your own mettle. And games had that. And some games still do. But not all of them, because they take it away because people don't like it. It's a very, very difficult one to kind of quantify, to measure. But adversity absolutely builds character, without a doubt. But you need to find the level of adversity that you can struggle through. Comfort is the enemy of ambition, as they say. You can come up against a level of adversity, take it on, succeed, and become a better person for having succeeded. Imagine if you had a choice. You had to climb a mountain, but there's two ways you can do it. You can either hop in the car and have someone drive you up there, or take a week and actually climb that mountain. One of them is way more convenient, but that ignores the fact that it's not about the convenience. It's about the adventure.
Think about this in your own life. I'm sure you've done something in your life the hard way. The way others told you, don't do that, do this instead, it's easier. And you weren't quite able to explain to them, it's not about it being convenient, it's about being an achievement.
Does anyone else on YouTube watch the channel Business Insider? Because they have a really interesting playlist called, I think it's either Still Standing or How Expensive. Still Standing is a really interesting one because it takes you through old handmade crafts and watching how artisans still make them. A lot of the Eastern episodes are fantastic, like, handmade katanas, handmade, amazing teapots, handmade this, handmade that. And I'm looking at them thinking, you know what? It really would be a hell of a lot more convenient if you could just have machines that do all this for you. But there is, and this is very important, there is a value to doing something slowly. There is a value to doing something in a difficult way because it is the process itself which imbues the final product with the spirit of the process that it went through. It's very hard to... Soul is, I suppose, the best way to put it. It actually is soul. Low down, I can't believe I'm in an actual Josh live stream, and now you're going to be in an actual Josh video. Congratulations, you've made it. Yeah, there's a beauty, a luxury about creating something through a process. And I'll give you an example in my own life. This is nowhere near as impressive as anything else, but when I make thumbnails for my YouTube videos, I don't have any presets. Even though I use exactly the same font, exactly the same text, and exactly the same style every single time, I do not have any presets that I use. I will manually load up. I use GIMP because it's a really good image manipulation program. And I will find a screenshot. I will screenshot it with Gyazo. I'll save that screenshot. I'll paste that screenshot in. I'll resize it exactly. I'll add in some text. I'll resize the text, even though I resize it to exactly the same size every single time. And then I will add in a little white border, little black border. I'll cut something out manually. You know, if you look at any of my thumbnails, they've always got like an image on the right-hand side, like a character or an item, and it's been cut out. I don't use any kind of stuff to do that. I use the lasso tool, and I go around and trace every single thing that I cut out. It's super inefficient. But to me, that's part of the artisanal process of actually making my videos. Someone said to me before, dude, you could save so much time if you just automated this. And I say, it's not about the saving of the time with this part, man. This is part of my therapeutic process to do it. This has value to me. I take handwritten notes for every single video that I make by hand. Okay? Every single page, handwritten notes. I have an absolute cup of empty pens in another room because when I look at that cup of empty pens, that to me means, look, you've done this much work. But to me, the process of making these videos is not just about pumping out quantity. It's about keeping it the quality that I feel comfortable with.
That's point one. Here's point two. They facilitated and rewarded player interaction.
Facilitated is just a fancy word for saying they allowed you to do this. It is a facility for a thing. What we're talking about, in case anyone's forgotten in the 1 hour we've been watching an 8-minute video, is we're talking about the things that old MMOs did better than new MMOs. And I asked many old people, this is a video of mine, and this is a 3-year-old video. And I want to watch and see if I agree with 3-year-old me. By that, I mean me from 3 years ago, not just stick me as a baby on the side. Tell me your opinions on MMORPGs. And then like tiny little vested baby me would be like, well, Josh, I believe that actually what you're looking for, because that's how I spoke when I was 3. It's true. Do I agree with me from 3 years ago? Okay. Point 1 was they made it too convenient and killed the adventure. Point 2, they facilitated and rewarded player interactions. So old MMOs, actually, this sounds silly, but old MMOs were not good games. They were good systems that you could interact with as a group. That's what it was. If you play an old MMO solo, you're going to have a bad time. You are. You jump on original Ultima, you jump on original EverQuest, which you can still play, and you try and play them completely on your own, good luck. But you grab a couple of friends, you grab a couple of guildies, you have some people jump on with you, like I had in this footage that we're watching right now, and I only got this because I was streaming at the time. Then people were like, you know what? Let's do this. Let's jump on. Now, World of Warcraft kind of bucked that trend because World of Warcraft was one of the first MMOs that you could actually legitimately play quite okay solo. Remember that when it first came out, World of Warcraft in 2004 was considered casual. You had these games like EverQuest, like Dark Age of Camelot, like Ultima Online. Look at World of Warcraft and go, oh, it's baby's first MMO. Oh, it's casual land. Oh, people are going to love that. It's super easy. You don't even need a team to succeed on that. Oh, so easy. And then it turned out that people wanted that because they wanted to be able to play a game by themselves. And then every other MMO from then on went, right, we've got to make solo modes possible. And every game that came out that said, hey, we're going to make this so it's got to be old school and difficult, they didn't succeed as well. I see so many new MMOs being made, especially on Kickstarter. Kickstarter MMOs really need to take a step back and look at themselves, especially when they say, hey, we're going to make this like games used to be. Okay, what games? Like Ultima and EverQuest. Okay, those games are still going. Like, who are you taking over from this? Why are you doing this? Are you making it inconvenient on purpose? Yes. Okay, cool. You're going to get a very niche community. It exists, but my God, it's niche. I'm just waiting for the 100% science-based Dragons MMO. That's going to be the one that kills World of Warcraft. That's going to be the WoW killer when the science-based Dragon MMO comes out.
This may be a more complex point, so let me explain, and bear with me. MMORPGs are...
I don't remember this video. I can't believe... Literally just said the same thing. Me from 3 years ago still had it.
Are not good games in the traditional sense. Now, before you get angry, hear me out. If I bought a single-player game for full price and it contained 1,000 identical fetch quests, I'd feel cheated. I'd think the devs were lazy and using cut and paste for everything. So why do I allow this in MMORPGs? Well, it's because, first and foremost, MMORPGs aren't really games in the traditional sense. They're multiplayer experience facilitators.
That's a very big sentence and makes me sound very clever. But ultimately it means that when the developers sat down, they weren't saying, hey, let's make the best RPG we can. They were saying, let's make the best multiplayer experience. This is why, whenever people ask me to describe World of Warcraft versus Final Fantasy XIV, I try and tell people that Final Fantasy XIV is an RPG that you can play online, whereas a game like EverQuest is an online experience with friends and a chatbot that you can also go and kill enemies in. It very much depends on almost where you sit on this spectrum of design. Is it... Because the spectrum of design, if you want purely multiplayer experiences, would probably be Fall Guys. There you go. Just 100 people running along a track. That's the most multiplayer experience you can have. Everyone's there. 100-player Tetris. Remember that? That existed for a while. Just game experiences that purely rely on player interaction. There's no game there. If you took away the players, you would have nothing to do. That is the most multiplayer game you can possibly have. Without the players, it doesn't exist. And then you have an RPG game. Doesn't matter if you don't have multiple players. With one player, it is still an RPG. That'd be your Baldur's Gates. MMOs have to find a way to sit in the middle. They need to be a good RPG experience by themselves. But they also need to push the multiplayer element. Otherwise, there is no reason to team up with people. And I think what we've seen recently in most MMORPG design is when people are designing a hardcore MMO, they tend to skew closer to the you need people to survive, it's not good without them element. Whereas when people are making a more casual MMORPG or an online RPG experience with friends, then they tend to skew more toward the side of it's a good RPG by itself and you can get your friends involved. And the kind of games you like exist somewhere on this spectrum.
This is simply a fancy way of saying they give multiple players the ability and the tools they need to interact with other players if they want to. Want to chat to someone? You can. Duel them, trade them, add them as a friend, all fine. Meet up with a huge group and go destroy a boss enemy together? Go for it. MMORPGs give you the ability to share an adventure with other people. And here's the important part. They rewarded you if you did. Grouping up is often faster experience. Boss monsters require a team to kill. In-game professions cannot all be mastered by one person, so a team is needed to gather rare materials if you need to craft things.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. That idea of they rewarded you for playing together. MMORPGs used to reward you for playing together. And slowly but surely, I think what's happened is that reward, that encouragement of playing together has been removed. Who played RuneScape? Who did the Heroes Quest? Or I think it was one of the quests that required one of you to be in the Phoenix gang and one of you to be in the Black Arm gang. That quest in RuneScape 3, the Shield of Arav quest, thank you. That quest in RuneScape 3 no longer needs you to team up with someone. You can now do that solo. You still have to team up in RuneScape Old School, but no longer in RuneScape 3. They removed the requirement to team up. Now, one of the reasons they did this was because doing that quest actually required that neither of you had done the quest. And it required almost a constant influx of new players to be able to do. The way it was originally set up, it was a constant influx of players. And there's a way to get around it now. There were ways to get around it back then, but mostly it required an influx of players. Without that influx of players, they realized that they just pretty much couldn't do that anymore. So they're like, right, we need to make this possible just for, solo players. It needs to be possible solo. But is that a good thing? Because RuneScape was set up to allow people to team up, and then it removed the ability. What about an MMORPG that actually punishes you if you do team up? Now that sounds really dumb, but if you could kill a boss with 2 or 3 people, and then a 4th or 5th person asked to join you, and it wouldn't make the kill any faster, but it would split the loot between more people, is that a good or a bad thing to do? Do you want to put an MMORPG player into the position where they have to ask themselves, is it worth taking this person? Is it worth giving this new person an experience within the game that we have that actually would make it worse for us? Mining in old school RuneScape used to be competitive, as in you couldn't have the same ore from the same rock that someone else had. Mining in RuneScape 3 is now an individual experience, and I'm pretty sure you can actually get bonuses if you do it with more people. Enemies can get stronger if you team up with people. Do you want to put players into a position where teaming up is a negative? Because there's 2 sides to this coin. If you put players into a position where having people with them makes the game objectively worse for them, they're not going to do it, and you have to facilitate solo play. But if you allow a player to master every single crafting system in the game and craft every single item, then they never have to make a choice. And if you want to have both the best sword and the best shield, you no longer need to find someone who is a master sword crafter and then a master shield maker. You can just become both these things yourself. You are an army of one person, effectively. Does removing reliance on a community change the experience of an MMORPG?
Now, however, many players are going through the game solo. While this isn't a bad thing by itself, I've personally enjoyed a few hours solo in Guild Wars 2. It does mean you're removing the multiplayer aspect of the game and focusing on the gameplay part, which was never, ever the main focus of the developers. A single-player game like The Witcher 3 or Deus Ex can focus on personal story, character interaction, world choices, and make you feel important. But the strength of an MMORPG, the single defining factor of that genre that makes it stand head and shoulders above other games, is other players. So developers will always place the majority of resources into making the multiplayer experience as great as possible.
How many of you have found an MMORPG on Steam, on Kickstarter, maybe it's dead, maybe it's in maintenance mode, and you've logged in to play it, and your first thought was, this would be really good if there were more people. This would be enjoyable if I had people to play with. And as soon as you feel that, have you ever thought, you know what? It's not worth carrying on my own. It's not worth being here because I know, I've got that feeling that no matter how good I get at this game, I will never be able to either complete it or experience all of it simply because I don't have somebody else with me. And that can be a lonely feeling because when you contact your friends and say, hey, I found this new MMO, it's probably going to be cool, but there's no players in it right now and I need your help. They are not going to want to join you because how many people would willingly join a dying MMO? Have you ever been told by your friends to join something and they've been like, nah, mate, that game's going to die. That game's dead. I don't want to invest my time in a dying MMO. That's another really weird kind of thought process that people have, but I get it. I understand it. When I was playing old school RuneScape, when it was just RuneScape years ago, before the evolution of combat happened, when the evolution of combat happened, when the game changed around so much, I said to my friends, look, guys, we've got to push on from RuneScape. We've got to move. We've got to go somewhere else. We've got to find a new home for a bit. I recommend Terra. And all my other friends went, Josh, we're going to go and play World of Warcraft. And I went, well, foolish fools, because Terra is going to be the winner in this battle of games. You mark my words, friends from many years ago. Terra, the action combat game, will be the king. And it's not often I make mistakes. You know, it happens. Don't get me wrong. But that was a mistake. The problem is, now, how many people could I legitimately convince to come and play an MMO with me if that MMO is going to die? I could probably convince quite a few people because I make MMORPG content. But if I didn't, if I was just a guy playing MMOs, I'm like, hey guys, come and play this game with me. It's dead, but it would be fun if there were 4 of us. They're going to go, no, I want to play a good MMO that's going to survive. Because survival of the community is vital. Because, and the wording here is very important, people say they don't want to invest their time in a bad game. Invest. Who here in the chat sees their time playing a video game as an investment of your time? Not just an enjoyment thing that you do, not just a hobby, but an investment. Because when you look back on the time that you've spent playing it, you don't want the time to feel wasted. What is the difference between a bad investment of time and a good investment of time? What's the difference? Is a good investment of time where the game is always available to you, and when you come back to the game in the future, the time that you've put into it in the past is still relevant? Or is a good investment the time that you had at the moment, you know, when it was happening, was still enjoyable and fun? Because if it only matters that the game survives, then your investment is actually more important to you in the future. You're not even worrying if you enjoy the time at the moment. You're not even thinking, oh my God, I want to make sure I'm having a good time right now. You're saying to yourself, I want to make sure the time I spend right now is still relevant in a few years' time. And that's a dangerous place to be. Who here has played an MMO which has died and you can't play anymore, but you still consider your time playing it time well spent? Has anyone ever played an MMO, the MMO has died, and your first thought was well, that's a waste of time. That was pointless. Why did I spend all those months, all those years enjoying that game only for it to go and die? What a waste of my time. What a stupid investment that was. Very few people get annoyed at themselves like that, and yet most people want to play an MMO that feels like an investment. In fact, many people, and I'm sure there are people in the chat that will resonate with this, many people actually don't enjoy the process of playing an MMO now, but they keep playing it because the sunk cost fallacy says to them, hey, if you don't keep playing this, you've wasted your time. Therefore, you must waste more time to justify the time you've already wasted. The moment you stop is the moment it becomes a waste. But as long as you keep going, you're still investing. As long as you keep playing, you've not wasted it. Doesn't matter if you don't enjoy it. Doesn't matter if it's killing you. Doesn't matter if it's actively making your day worse. You got to keep doing it, because otherwise you got to justify to yourself why you've done it for so long. And you don't want to do that.
As an experiment, I played through multiple MMORPGs to check, could I reach the final level, the final boss, or the final dungeon, or experience all this game has, without talking to another real player? And unfortunately, the answer was yes. Looking for group tools removed the need for me to actually look for a group.
Why would you play an MMO solo? I've already made a video on this, but just have a think about this. You want to play an RPG. You want to play a good RPG. On your own, solo, not interact with anyone. You play Baldur's Gate 1, 2, or 3. You can play The Witcher. You can play a multitude of good RPGs. You play Divinity, Original Sin 1 and 2. But if you do that, if you sit and play that game, you are very aware that your community, your social bubble, if you will, stops at the computer because there's no internet connection. Your movements in game, your combat, your collection, your achievements, your existence within that virtual world exists entirely between you and the screen. Nobody else knows about it. But there is a love, there is a beauty to being known to exist within a world that has other people, even if you want to play on your own. That's why people play MMORPGs solo. Instead of playing a better mechanical single-player RPG, they play a worse mechanical MMO because the community element has value to them. It's nice to be playing a game online and see someone run past in the distance doing their own thing. You know that's a real human being. You know it's a real person. Unless it's RuneScape and they're collecting flags, in which case it's a bot. But you know that that person is also playing the game. They see you, you see them. There's that connection. As fleeting and as shallow as it is, there is that connection. There is that moment. And that has value. How many of you have sat down on your PC? I do this all the bloody time. It makes me feel really sad. How many of you, you've sat at your PC, you've sat at your PlayStation, you've sat at your Xbox, whatever your gaming console of choice is, and you've loaded up something single player. For me, it's probably Roller Coaster Tycoon. Freaking love Roller Coaster Tycoon. It's probably Age of Empires. It's probably Command & Conquer. It's Deus Ex Human Revolution. It's Portal. It's a single player game. And after about half an hour, so 45 minutes of playing it, you think, why am I doing this? Am I enjoying the game? Oh yeah, on a level. I kind of like it. It's kind of fun. I like the mechanics. Graphics are good memories of it. I know what to do. But I feel this is a waste of time. But then you log into an MMORPG. And physically, in your own words, all you're doing is sitting and staring at a screen. It's all any of us are doing. Why does that time spent within a virtual world have more value to you just because people can see you existing in it, even if you don't enjoy it as much as games that you're playing offline? That's super annoying to me. I would love to sit there and play video games for fun the way that I used to, except I can't seem to value them as much if I know it's only me in them. It has so much intrinsic value to me being in a world with other people. I very much need that community because then I know that my time isn't just fun, it's an investment. And I think, oh yeah, I might not be making much progress, but I'm making progress with other people. They can see me doing this. This has value to the future. It may not be enjoyable now, but it's got value to the future.
Dungeon guides remove the need for me to ask and learn about the dungeon.
Elder Scrolls Online is the frickin' worst for this. Elder Scrolls Online. Join any dungeon you've not played before. Hey guys, first time in the dungeon. What are the mechanics? Every single person. Read the wiki. Watch a video. Do something else. Very few people in the Elder Scrolls Online actually take the time to explain fricking anything to me. And I really want to like the game. I really do. I love everything about the Elder Scrolls Online. I love the lore. I love the world. I love the look of it. I love the general play. I love everything except playing it. It's really irritating to me. Like on paper, it is just perfect. And then I sit down to play it and I'm like, yes, I remember now why I don't play this very much. How many of you have wanted to actually take on a dungeon without any kind of guide, without any kind of experience of it? You sit down to play it without knowing what to expect. And you ask the community, hey, what do I expect here? And they immediately just brush you off. No one takes the time to explain. So you have no choice but to go and read a guide. No choice but to go and read the wiki. No choice but to watch a video. And then when someone else says, hey, what's this dungeon about? You have a choice to say to them, okay, yeah, this is what you do. Or you just say to them what was said to you, read the wiki. And it's a cycle that continues itself. It perpetuates itself. It's very, very irritating. I'm sure that other games are just as bad, but I think The Elder Scrolls Online is the one that I found it the worst in. It is very difficult to find a group of players who are willing to take the time to explain to a new player how to play in-game. Because time taken to explain anything is inefficient.
And marketplaces or auction houses made it possible to buy and sell my wares without ever trading anything other than an NPC. In almost every example of a favourite MMORPG memory people sent me, people and the relationships they formed, be that friends, enemies, rivals, or in some rare cases, becoming real-life partners, were always present. People and players make MMORPGs what they truly are. And if you remove the multiplayer interaction aspect, you're often left with just a big world full of lonely people. So what do we...
We can all be sad together. It's okay. Big world full of lonely people. Would you prefer to be alone, or would you prefer to be alone together? It's a horrible thing. Misery loves company. Misery frickin' loves company. If you're playing an MMO and you are alone, would you prefer to be alone together? That's unfortunately what it is. Everyone's like, oh my God, there's millions of other people. Yeah, there are. Do you chat to them? No. No. Do you interact? As briefly as possible. I do my thing, they do theirs. They kill some bosses, put some stuff on the auction house. I craft some things, sell it to them. We go our own ways. We're alone. Together.
Here's what I truly believe will happen until MMORPG designers change.
Remember, I was super confident 3 years ago. I had all the answers to everything. Now I understand how much I don't know. So whatever answer I'm about to give for how we fix MMOs, first of all, I'm going to fix MMOs in the next 10 minutes of the video, which that's a very impressive thing to be able to do. It's been going on for years, but I'm very impressed I was able to do this 3 years ago. Let's see what I say. I do not remember.
Players will demand convenience. They will demand things in the game become more obvious, easier to achieve, and more streamlined. The developers will supply these demands and introduce things like looking for group, teleport directly to dungeons or other players, auction houses to sell your wares, no penalty for death, and personal loot for everyone. Players will enjoy the convenience for a short while before realizing that the magic, the spark of adventure that was gained through overcoming the adversity of the lack of convenience has gone.
Was that accurate? Have games added in a load of convenient stuff? I mean, I'm pretty sure that World of Warcraft now allows you to just buy whatever those tokens were that were on the shop that they can do that thing. Was that accurate? I predicted that would happen 3 years ago in this video, that everything would then be like that. And then people were like, oh, yeah, that's happened now. It's not 100%. I'm sure there are some examples of games that do or don't do this. But I think in general, convenience, especially for money, has definitely increased. That's without a doubt. Convenience for money has absolutely increased.
Then they'll leave and forever roam the world looking for another MMORPG to recapture the feeling of magic from the first, never realizing the feeling of magic wasn't ever coming from the game. It was the feeling you got for overcoming obstacles and achieving something in the face of adversity.
How many people have amazing memories of an MMO as a kid, and you've been jumping around as like almost an MMO nomad for the last couple of months or couple of years, trying to recapture that? It's horrible. I know it sounds really cheesy, but the magic genuinely was the friends we made along the way. And that magic has switched now from in the game to out of the game, because the magic that happens now is this. Most people were never in a clan or a guild in any game that has over 2,000 players. Some of you may have been. Some of you may have been in clans that were massive, but most of you probably never had a 2,000 person clan or group or, thing. But you're all on Twitch right now. Is this the modern day version of a guild, of a clan? We're not all playing the same games at the same time, but we have the community that connects us together. I've got so many examples that Discord has created groups within games. People have joined up in. There is a separate little chat in the Discord for every game you can think of. Final Fantasy XIV, Path of Exile, Guild Wars 1, Guild Wars 2, Terra, God Rest Its Soul. Some people have managed to form guilds and friends from the community that we have created on Twitch and on YouTube. It's different vibes to an in-game guild. There's different vibes to an in-game clan, without a doubt, but that level of community still exists. It's just almost stepped out of the game and into the internet as a whole.
Players will then try new games, rushing through them and not talking to others in a vain quest to recapture the feeling of true adventure.
Trying a new game, rushing through it. How many people downloaded New World? Technically, almost everyone did. How many people rushed New World? And then how many people got to the end of it and thought, hey, I'm giving up now. I'm done. There's not enough content here. Have you ever been guilty? I know I have. Have you ever been guilty of downloading a new MMO and instead of taking your time, instead of exploring, instead of playing inefficiently, you're like, right, I'm going to rush this. I'm going to read a guide for the most efficient build. I want to know exactly where I'm putting my PowerPoints. I'm not even going to read any of the other builds. I'm not going to read the tooltips. I'm not going to work out what they do. I'm just going to put the buttons on my hotbar that the wiki tells me to do, and then I'm going to smash those buttons, and I'm going to play, and then in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to wonder why I don't feel any connection to this game. I'm going to rush through this game because if I don't rush, I'm not going to keep up with the crowd. But the irony is, if I keep up with the crowd, I have to sacrifice something, and that something is emotional connection to the process. It sucks. Statistically, most of us download a game, rush through it, and when the community begins to drop, realize we didn't enjoy the process. What we enjoyed was being part of that rush of people. There is something absolutely magical about being within a community, a crowd, a cult, if you will, of people that are rushing through something. There is no day more magical than day one on a fresh server. There is nothing more beautiful than everyone being low-level, doing low-level stuff, fighting low-level bosses, and the first person to get a green or a blue item, the first person to get something uncommon, rare, mythic. People are like, yes, that's the feeling we've got back. We're back. Then a couple of weeks pass. Then everyone's got it. Then everyone's reading guides. Then everyone's just doing the bosses mechanically. And you go back to the opening towns, and they're pretty dead. They're pretty empty. One person might join every now and again, but even though they're going through the same forests, killing the same enemies, getting the same drops, magic's gone. So you move on to the next game, or you wait until the next league happens, the next thing, the next rush of people, because it was never the game, it was the rush of people.
They'll avoid chatting to others because that's an experience waste. They won't join a guild because they want to play solo, and
Sorry, when I said they'll avoid chatting to others because that's an experience waste, I very much just realized in my head that in-game experience is different to actual experiences within life. And there's got to be a sentence here. I've not fully formulated it yet, but it's something like, you're basically sacrificing the experience in pursuit of experience.
then after getting maybe halfway to the level cap, they'll quit, declaring the game boring, bad, pay to win, too hard, or too easy. They expect the game to give them the fun and the adventure and the magic. They will never stop and realise they used the game to find fun the first time. The cycle will then continue forever.
anything can be really enjoyable and really fun if you're doing it with the people that you have a good time with. It's almost an experience demand. You ever sat down in front of the TV, in front of a film, in front of a game, started playing it, and your mindset has always been, make me happy. And within about half an hour to an hour, you realize, this isn't doing that. I'm not happy anymore. I'm not enjoying this. I can sit down to play my favorite PS2 game, SSX Tricky, or I can sit down to play Burnout 3, or I can sit down, and I don't want this to be like a doomer conversation, because I believe that there is a great deal of positivity to be gained from this and a great deal of fun to still be had. I'm actually a huge advocate for these things can be fun. I just think that we're expecting almost enjoyment to be pumped directly into our veins, when instead what they were giving us was the ability to have fun with friends, and we need to bring something into that. It's not easy to make time for other people. It's not easy to always chat in a guild. It's not easy to find those few hours every week. But when you don't do it, you very quickly realize it was worth it. It was difficult, but it's without a doubt worth it. And yeah, I am absolutely extrapolating out here. But what I'm extrapolating to is people seem to think that if something is easy to do, then it is always the worthwhile thing to do. And if something is difficult, it is not worth doing, when often it's the difficult stuff, the stuff you have to put effort into, that really gives you the value back. It's not easy to lift the weights in the gym, but it's worth it to do it. It's not easy to follow a diet. It's not easy to wake up at the right time. None of these things are easy. No one's saying they are. But they're worth it.
How do we fix this? I'm going to tell you how we fix this, and you're not going to like it. There are 3 steps we need to follow to bring back the true magic of MMORPGs, and in order they are.
I'm about to fix MMOs. I fixed them 3 years ago. Clearly nobody listened to me.
Realise and understand that every single MMORPG sucks in a different way. Yes, every single one. MMORPGs all have redeeming features, but they also all have terrible aspects. Combat may be great in Neverwinter, but beyond that, the game has virtually nothing. EverQuest has a deep character stats menu, but good God, the gameplay is clunky. Guild Wars 2 looks gorgeous and has fantastic jumping puzzles, but I hope you like using attacks linked solely to your weapon. Every MMORPG sucks in its own special way. There is no greatest game. There is no MMO that will unite us all. So please, as a player, stop looking for it. Pick one you can stand and give it a fair try.
I mean, yeah, I still agree with that. I do tell people that every MMO sucks in their own way. They're like, oh, how many people, it's okay if you're guilty of this as well, but I mostly see it on forums, how many people are waiting for the perfect MMO? That one that everyone plays. That one that has everything you want in it. Because think about it like this. Imagine you have 100 people in a group and you say to them, hey, what do you want in an MMO? And you take what every single person wants and you say, well, I can't put everything in because some of you have contradicting ideas, but I'm going to put in a kind of amalgamation of mostly what most of you want. That game would appeal to no one, because no one person would actually get what they want. They would get a version of what they want that's been diluted with what somebody else wants, and diluted with what somebody else wants, and then slashed and changed with what somebody else wants. It's the Homer, the car that Homer ends up making that appeals to no one. It's that episode of The Simpsons where they're doing toy research and they say, so, what do you want? And every single kid wants everything in this toy and they realize they can't do it. One thing that I do respect Path of Exile for was, I said to Chris directly, Chris, you do realize that your incredibly overwhelming skill tree is driving people away. People open that skill tree and they go, no, too much, not for me, I'm gone. And he said, yeah, we do understand that. It's by design. I'm like, what do you mean? Can you explain? He's like, oh yeah, people that would get overwhelmed by that are not the kind of people that are going to enjoy our game. So instead, we leave it there as almost like a litmus test. And if people open that and go, oh my God, yes, this is amazing, then they're the exact kind of people that we want, and we can pretty much design a game toward them. If we take that away, or if we present it in a slightly kinder, gentler, easier way, then what's going to happen is the players will get invested, and by the time they get to the end game, they will realize that the game is so complicated, they aren't actually into it. So we almost filter the players that want incredible complexity at the start, and we front load this idea that there's a lot you can do here. If you don't like lots, this ain't the game for you. And I thought, you know what? I respect that. I think that he would get more players if the skill tree was beginner friendly. But he specifically doesn't want it to be beginner friendly because he wants the players who want that kind of game. If you try and make a game that appeals to everyone, Elden Ring does not appeal to everyone. Farmville does not appeal to everyone, mostly because Farmville, that was the first example that popped into my head. My brain is still stuck in 2010 Facebook. But imagine if you were to try and make a game that appealed to both Elden Ring players and Farmville players. By the time you make that game, neither of those demographics are going to play your game. So when you make an MMORPG, choose the demographic you want, whether it's hardcore old players or, fast zoomer new players with no attention span. That's fine. Make it for that audience and hyper-focus onto your audience.
2. Remove convenience. Quality of life upgrades are fine. I understand reducing 2 button clicks to 1 button click isn't going to break the community, but anything that decreases required gameplay time or removes the challenge of achieving a certain goal, be that selling an item or completing a dungeon, has got to go.
Oh, that's a big statement right there. I don't know if I agree with myself on that statement. Removing all convenience. Dangerous. Dangerous, because I would disagree with myself there. And I'll tell you why I disagree. It is very easy to just continue with whatever you're doing anyway. It is very difficult to give players something and then take it away. If you were to give players the convenience of doing stuff and then remove that convenience, they'd hate it. If they never have the convenience in the first place, they wouldn't care. Most players don't. So the idea of removing convenience entirely is much more nuanced than I'm making it sound here. Because I did say that quality of life increases and upgrades are fine, but what's the line? Because that's blurred. Let's take RuneScape for an example, because it's on screen right now. In RuneScape 3, you have something called your tool belt. In the old school RuneScape, you never used to have a tool belt. And that means that you needed to carry your axe, your chisel, your secateurs, your spade on you in your actual inventory. But the tool belt means that those items now go onto the tool belt, which is its separate inventory, so it doesn't take up space in your main inventory. Is that quality of life or is that convenience? Because at what point does quality of life become convenience? Is quality of life convenience? At what point do they cross over? I mean, a quality of life update would be you can swap worlds with a single click instead of needing to log out, log back in, change worlds, go from there. Because that's not necessarily mechanically changing the experience within the game. But any quality of life within the game, that's going to be a mechanical change. That's going to change your experience. And that's why this is subjective. So the sentence I just gave was quality of life is fine, convenience is not. What I didn't realize 3 years ago was that they are, in fact, effectively the same thing on a sliding scale. And I don't know where that scale should start or should stop.
Auction houses shouldn't be removed entirely, but should either be in a hard-to-reach place, extremely dangerous, or place very heavy taxes onto all items being sold.
I'd like to just point out that they did add a tax to the old school RuneScape Grand Exchange. People pushed back against it, and it has removed a hell of a lot of gold from the game and helped with inflation. So my idea of removing the convenience for the auction house by adding a tax onto it was actually done.
To vastly reduce your profit and give an incentive to go back to player trading. Looking for group tools shouldn't teleport you or your group directly to the dungeon entrance. Tutorials should give you the basics that you need to survive and then leave enough mystery for you have to ask someone or research it yourself. You have to say, what is this thing and what does it do? But if anything removes adventure and replaces it with convenience, it has no place in an adventure game.
Far too broad a statement and not backed up enough by the evidence given in the video. It is also a subjective opinion, not an objective opinion. So I don't know if I agree with myself on that one there. We definitely need to change that. Also, this was me being very, very blue sky thinking. This was me thinking about the idea that removing knowledge would be good when there's just no way you could do it. You can't stop people making wikis. You can't stop people making guides. The only way that you would effectively make a guide or a wiki less impactful is by changing the experience in the game. And I think Final Fantasy XIV do this, don't they? Because I went back and I redid the Gaius fight relatively recently, and don't Final Fantasy XIV actually give bosses updated attacks, updated changes, updated abilities, different kind of AoE effects? I'm sure they do. And then you look into the idea of procedural generation of maps. You look into the idea of AI learning. If you shower a boss in fire damage, would that boss's fire defense go up? Would they absorb it and throw it back at you as a fireball? Would they change their tactics? I think this is actually where AI is going to go to within game development. Not necessarily graphical, not necessarily writing, because AI writing is terrible, but the idea that the boss that you're killing learns from your tactics and changes around. That'd be an interesting way to look at it. It gives it much more variation. The only way that you can make a guide irrelevant is making the information in the guide wrong, instead of trying to destroy the guide. Dax, you put a really interesting point in the chat. You said this means that new players can never experience what old players did. That's an interesting tangent to go on, because can they now? When World of Warcraft Classic came out, did brand new players who had never experienced Warcraft before, did they have the same experience as brand new players at the time? Because the Classic launch has to take into account the fact that wikis and guides exist. And I am willing to bet that a lot of new players watched videos on what to do before jumping into the game. What's the best class? What's the best weapon? What's the most efficient way to play? How should I build this? How should I put my attacks? What's my rotation? So I actually don't think that any classic server reboot of an MMO would be able to give the same experience, simply because those guides and that information exists already. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. We can't close Pandora's box on all of that information that exists. What we can do, in fact, ironically, the only way that we could make sure that new players have the same experience is changing around what the experience is. Because if you change the experience from what people are expecting, suddenly it is new. And those guides are wrong. They're irrelevant. And people who are playing the classic version suddenly think, oh my God, I don't know what to do. We now have to learn the game again. That's the irony. If you keep the game exactly as it was, no one will be able to experience it fresh for the first time, which I think is what people want to do. Whereas if you change the game from what it was to something different, Everyone is experiencing it fresh for the same time. It's just not what people remember. This is one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of things. You keep it the same, the challenge isn't there because there are guides. You change it, it's not what people remember, but the challenge returns.
And finally, this one's on you. Number 3, talk to other people. You are not the only person who wishes for MMORPGs to regain the spark of magic they once had. I'm willing to bet the majority of players want that feeling back. But there's a horrible truth we have to face up to first. That magical feeling of adventure, camaraderie, and fellowship comes from forming bonds with other people. And doing that takes time, which is both effort and an experience point waste. It is not efficient. You have to make the choice to stop going after experience efficiently, to stop pushing toward a numerical or item-driven goal, and actively build a connection, a friendship with someone else. In every MMORPG I play, I say hello when someone runs past me. Because of this, it will probably take me years to achieve the best gear, while others, it may take months, because
I'm sorry guys, but that one still is on you. That one's on all of us. We've got to do it. You're standing in a group of 100 people. The irony is that all 100 probably want the feeling of magic back, and yet all 100 don't want to talk to anyone else. It's this horrible irony. It's this clash of desires at the top. You want the connection that you used to have, but you don't want to act in the way that generates those connections. And there is no other... I mean, the problem with going outside is that there are other people. And other people suck. We know this. I've met them. Most of them are terrible. A few of them are all right. But if you're going to sit there complaining that you want games to have that connection again, you've got to be willing to connect. And if you aren't, you don't actually want a connection. You want to complain. You've got to be willing to talk. You've got to be willing to chat to people and get involved. And you've got to be willing to sacrifice your in-game experience to have a personal experience.
I'm willing to spend the time being inefficient and talking to people instead of grinding constantly. If you want the unique connection that only MMORPGs can provide, you've got to understand that that comes at the price of efficiency. Spending time talking to other players isn't convenient as far as experience or item farming is concerned. But convenience, as we already know, kills adventure. If after those 3 points you're thinking, where's my proof? What exact proof do I have that players miss the old MMORPG spark, the old magic only achieved by lack of convenience and player interaction? Well, old school RuneScape, a build of the game from 2007 with player-voted updates, hit more than 100,000 active players recently, with millions of accounts made in total. WoW Classic is being hyped no end. An early game build removing years of updates and conveniences, pulling in audience of over 100,000 Twitch viewers. EverQuest 1 from 1999. Early builds of the core game are alive and well, with hundreds of people still selling player to player in the market tunnel and thousands of active players. I personally have recently started playing on the Mangler Progression server.
It was a good server. Now, I think this argument that I'm making in the video is a little bit reductive because there is at least a level of quality that needs to be taken into account of the fact that some games were good and some games were bad and some games provided a better experience than others. Some games were easier to install. I know people who, if installing a game is difficult, won't bother playing it. How many people of you in the chat right now, how many people have ever tried to install a game, ran into difficulty and thought, you know what, it's not worth it. If you make a game inconvenient to play, most people just won't bother playing it. There is definitely proof that older games or games with less convenience fostered communities that end up being stronger. This, of course, goes back to the military example from earlier. When you go through a difficult time with someone that is supporting you, you create a very strong bond with that person. A bond that is difficult to break. It's difficult to make because you need to go through adversity together and succeed, which is the hard thing to do. But once you've done that, it's a much stronger bond. So, people in chat, would you agree that most people will be scared away from difficulty, but those who remain and go through difficult situations together will form a very strong bond that is hard to break? The way this relates to MMOs is difficult old games like EverQuest are still going, and the reason they've still got those players, some may say it's sunk cost fallacy. I would say it's potentially partly that, but it's also because those people, those players who've been playing for so long, have gone through so much adversity in the game together, both mechanical and boss-wise and installing it and community-wise, that the bonds they've created are strong enough to keep them around. When you take a brand new MMORPG that gives you everything you want immediately, you don't need to struggle to do anything, which means you don't need to struggle to create those bonds. You don't need to go through the adversity. And indeed, when most players are presented with adversity, they quit. They leave. And they never create that camaraderie, that bond that is born from overcoming a problem together. Old MMOs may not be better, but when they were all we had, your choice was overcome this problem or don't experience this genre. Now the choice is overcome this problem or quit, download another game and then keep playing that until you get to a problem. Then quit, download another game and keep playing that till you come to a problem. Quit, download another game. The cycle continues. I've even made a video called Too Many MMOs Ruins MMOs. I will react to that at some point. But in general, I do believe that older games, when they were rarer, forced players to create those bonds of friendship or bonds of rivalry. They forced them to connect through mutual suffering, and that's a very, very strong bond. It's difficult to form that when you can just leave whenever you want and find another game.
With none of the 20 years worth of expansions, and it's alive and well. Private servers running the first or second builds and patches of many games still pull in thousands of pounds a month, providing players with that authentic, retro experience. There is a market there crying out for the magic to come back. To sum up, in the immortal words of Radchek from Starship Troopers, something given has no value. Whichever MMORPG you choose will not give you adventure, or magic, or fellowships or friendships. It will simply provide you with the tools needed to go and take that.
It's not often you end a video with a quote from Starship Troopers, but I think it should happen more. Something given has no value. With so many MMOs available to you, and the general throwaway attitude that is more prevalent in society than it was many years ago, when adversity is faced, one of the first choices is leave. And leaving means that you never overcome the adversity, you never form the bonds that overcoming it rewards you with, and then you never get to bask in the feeling of having a strong bond to anything. I've met so many people that give up at the first sign of difficulty and then wonder why they feel, as individuals, empty. And that's a horrible thought. And it's an even worse realization that you have to say to someone at some point, look, you've got to deal with this
bit that sucks. Because if you don't, you won't understand the value of what enduring this gives you. And from a design point of view, someone will say to me, well, everything should be good. Everything should be good all the time. Everything should be super easy all the time, forever. Yeah, but in the real world, when you look at that, you realize that people then don't understand the value of completing anything. But it's not black and white. Every single player says that, oh yeah, you've got to endure a Realm Reborn in Final Fantasy XIV to get to the good bit. Well, that's going to drive hundreds of players away. Thousands, potentially. I mean, maybe even tens of thousands with the game the size of Final Fantasy XIV. So that quote on screen, something given, has no value. Here is a game, I will give you the best weapons, I will give you the best armor, I will give you the best abilities. You will not have to work for them. You will not have to fight for them. You will not have to take them. You will not have to defend them. You will not have to work for them. And because of this, you won't value them.
That old MMORPG you're fondly remembering from your youth, and we all have one. Those days gone by with friends, adventuring and exploring. They didn't happen because the game gave you everything. Quite the opposite. They happened because the game gave you nothing and you took everything. You earned your adventure. You put the effort in to meet up with players, explore unusual mechanics, make sense of this complex world, and find ways to overcome the inconvenience. That was your adventure. You have, with any game, the interface to speak to others, the ability to walk off the beaten path and see what's over that mountain, the self-discipline to not Wikipedia every single thing and ask other players, how do I do this?
I like the fact that I said you didn't have a good time years ago because the game gave you everything. Quite the opposite. And what I should have said was you had a good time because you gave the game everything. That would have been so much better in this video. That would have worked. You gave it your time. You gave it your love. You gave it your guild, your community, your clan, your passion. You gave it your attention. You gave it the best years of your life. And in return, it gave you a decent adventure. And now, a lot of people don't give the game what the game needs. Unfortunately, you do sometimes need to give a game a chance. I have a friend who started playing Baldur's Gate 1, 2, and 3, and they were like, oh yeah, I didn't get into it. It wasn't very good after the first hour. I'm like, okay, what'd you do? I just ran around, died a lot. Did you read your spells? No. You talk to NPCs? No. Did you do anything that would add energy from you to the game? No. Oh, all right, cool. I can see why this is not working for you then. That's absolutely fine. And if they didn't enjoy that, that's okay. But there is a back and forth. I think there is a back and forth between you and the game. There is an understanding that at some point you need to put energy in order to get something out. And most people want to be passive consumers. Maybe this is what it is. Maybe because we're all jaded MMO vets, because we've seen films and we've seen TV shows and we've read books, and because nothing is novel to us anymore, we now sit here and we want to be passive kind of consumers of fun instead of active participants in the process. Does anyone else feel that? Does anyone feel that you've got to a point now where you know you're not putting as much energy in? You know that you're not engaging as much because you've not got as much free time. You've not got as much energy. You don't need to engage because Wikipedia will tell you what to do. You don't need to read because a YouTube guide will tell you what to do. You don't need to talk because Group Finder will do it for you. You have no reason to engage with an MMO beyond a surface level connection, and then you wonder why you have a surface level connection, and then you wonder why you're not getting back what you had when you engaged more.
But simply, you as a player may not be forced to, but you do have the freedom to say, I'm going to do this the hard way, because that's more rewarding. If we want MMORPGs to return to the glory they were once at, we need to remove the convenience that is holding the adventure back, and we need to put personal time and effort into connecting with people going on this adventure with us. If you're an MMORPG fan and want to game together, please come and join me on Twitch. I play a huge variety of MMORPGs, and I would love to meet all of you in-game, whatever game that may be.
I didn't watch this ahead of time, but the fact that I put that in there and we're still on the same Twitch account, on the same channel, still talking about MMOs, that's pretty magical.
I'm usually streaming 5 nights a week.
That's a lie.